So the other day I was driving this 2012 Prius, and the engine just started shaking, and I've never experienced that before. I didn't know what it was. Eventually the check engine light came on, so I had the messages read, and what it said was that the cylinder 1 was misfiring. I've had the spark plugs done about 30,000 miles ago, so I knew those weren't the issue. But I didn't know whether it was going to be the fuel injectors or the ignition coils. So I went ahead and got the ignition coils changed out. I should have tested them, but you know, my car has a lot of miles, so I figured I'd just get it done so I don't have to worry about it in the future. Getting them changed out is kind of a pain in the ass. So the last option now is, since the spark plugs and ignition coils are done, I'm gonna have to figure out what's wrong with the fuel injectors. I put a bottle of fuel line cleaner into the gas tank. That didn't really seem to help, but I'm gonna do a before and after of what happens to my engine once I go get the fuel injectors cleaned out. So we're just going to do a quick test and comparison. So I'm going to go ahead and start the engine. So if you take a look, I have 174,000 miles, 583. There's the check engine light. We're going to go take a look at the engine. And there you go. After startup, it just kind of runs pretty smooth after that. But I just don't like that cold startup where it makes all that knocking sound. So I'm gonna go get the fuel injectors cleaned out. As you can see, the ignition coils right there, those 4, have already been cleaned out or replaced. The spark plugs underneath have been replaced. So, well, let's hope it works when I clean out the fuel injectors, and let's see if there's any difference. So I got the fuel injectors cleaned, and I'm gonna go ahead and start it up and see if it resolved the issue. One weird thing I read online was that if you put the car in neutral, then it'll stop the knocking until the car warms up. So we'll see if that works. So here we go. Well, check engine light is off. Well, putting it in neutral does stop the knocking for a little bit. But I definitely don't feel comfortable driving it. So have to try again, look for another solution. So an update on the Prius. I've driven it about 20-30 miles. I'm up to 174,617 miles. Since I did the fuel injection cleaner, there's been no check engine light. It went away on its own and it hasn't come back yet, so hopefully that takes care of that. Today I'm gonna take care of some other stuff, and hopefully that will take care of the knocking. Everything taken apart. Got the manifold, intake manifold here. Got the EGR pipe. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff inside there I'm gonna have to clean out. There's just a ton of oil inside the manifold. So just gonna clean it all out and see what happens. So I got stuck for about an hour and a half. I went and took off the PCV valve right here. Came out, put in the new one, but it wouldn't fit. Couldn't figure out why until I compared the two. Turns out they're not the same. So I had to go to a dealership, different one, get the right PCV valve. This is the part number I got, 12204-37010, which is not really close to what they gave me the first time around. So gonna put this in and then put the rest of the manifold together and see what the next step is. is inside. You can't even see the other side. And you see how this one's same way? So let's go ahead and clean that out. So last night we finished the work on the intake manifold and the EGR system, and it seemed to work. However, this will be the first cold start in the morning that usually starts the knocking. So, you know, this would be the true test right here. So let's see if it worked. So no check engine light. That's good. And looks promising. I'm gonna go over what I spent to try to get this car fixed. The spark plugs were done 30,000 miles ago, so I knew it wasn't that. I figured the ignition coils were pretty cheap. I went ahead and got them changed out for 77 bucks. Just as a stop fix measure, I put in some fuel injector cleaner. That didn't really help much. I mean, if your car's knocking, you're not going to be driving it around much so that it can work its way through the system. But I figured, you know, it's 174,000 miles. Might as well get the fuel injection service done just to clear out that misfire check engine light message. And I think it did help. It removed the check engine light. I didn't get random misfires or random knocking. It pretty much was only knocking when I first started the engine in the morning. And that was pretty much it. The rest of the day it was okay, unless I left the car sitting for a while. So to me, it was worth it to get the fuel injection done. Would I do it again? Probably I'll do it every 100,000 miles. We'll see if it makes it another 100. But the final replacement, or the final work yesterday, I did the PCV valve. That was 13 bucks. I cleaned the intake manifold, the EGR pipe, the cooler. I bought some purple power, some brake clean, a gallon of coolant. I only used maybe 1/3 of the coolant. Bought some rags, bought an intake manifold gasket. Also bought some other tools, but I'm not adding that in because, you know, the tools and like the safety glasses you can use anytime for other stuff. So yeah, ended up costing me 95 bucks for everything. So let's compare to what it would have cost me at the dealership. So the EGR cooler at the dealership is $450, and the labor to install it was $390 just for the cooler. And they said that's if we knew exactly what you wanted. So if you fix that and that doesn't fix your issue, then you'd have to pay them $150 to $200 to diagnose further. Or you can just pay them that $150 or $200 and, you know, let them tell you what to fix. I figured, you know, I saved a ton of money. It took me 13 hours to do everything, but, you know, I'm no expert, so it took me a while to figure things out. So while everything's fresh in my head, I just want to go over some things that I remember for next time. I'm probably going to have to do this again at 100,000 miles, the next 100,000 miles, so I might as well just take notes of it. Removing the window wiper, the cowl, that was all easy. Removing the air box right here, that was pretty easy. Removing the throttle body and the manifold, that was easy. I only really got stuck right here. Underneath here is a little clip, connects this whole bar to the intake manifold right there, and that clip, I just couldn't figure out how to remove it. If you watch NutzAboutBoltz video, he kind of skips over that part. He probably had as hard a problem or something, and he just took too long and didn't record it. I just couldn't figure it out. I tried to do it cleanly with some needle nose pliers, just wouldn't really work. In the end, I just kind of jammed a flathead underneath there and just pried it apart. It's not the best technique, but you know, I spent 30 minutes on it. The other thing is the EGR cooler. Underneath the EGR cooler, there's one of these pins right here underneath it, and there's also a nut. And to get to this nut, you need a long deep socket, and I didn't have it. So basically my short one just wasn't getting the job done. So I had to head to Harbor Freight Tools to get the right tool. The other thing is I didn't have one of these E8 Torx socket to remove this pin. There's 4 of them total, but you only have to remove 2 or 3. The other thing is this is way too long. There's very little room underneath here. If you can get one that's like half as long, that's better. The Harbor Freight didn't have anything shorter, so I bought what I could. The other thing is coolant inside the EGR cooler will dump out once you remove that main hose underneath here. You can't really do much about it. There's nothing to pinch off. So I would recommend getting a small funnel, attaching some tube to it, and then running that tube outside the car into a tub, so that when the coolant does come out, at least it gets routed outside. I threw a bunch of rags inside here, hoping that would, you know, do the job. It did protect all the connectors and whatever, but I still ended up with a ton of coolant on the floor. So the other thing is you'll need something to pinch off the hoses. I didn't have anything. I improvised using vice grips and stuff like that. So definitely you'll need at least 4 to 6 of them. If you're gonna do both, I did both the intake manifold and the EGR cooler. If you're only going to do this, you only need 4 of them. The other thing that you might want to consider if you're actually going to do this, it won't make sense now, but it will later. You have 2 of these pins and bolt or nuts in the back of the EGR cooler, and in NutzAboutBoltz video, he suggests removing those 2 pins in the back, because then you can pull the EGR cooler out sideways and then out. My recommendation is to leave those pins in there and then remove these 2 pins underneath, and then you can just pull it out. The reason for that is because when you put it back together, those 2 pins will center your gasket in the back. And you know, I didn't have those 2 pins because I was doing it his way, and I had a hell of a time getting that gasket lined up. Probably took me an hour. So you know, that's my recommendation there. I feel like it's easier to put that pin underneath in than to put the 2 pins in the back in with the gasket to work with, since the other pin has no gasket that you have to deal with. So those are the tools that I had to go get, which made me take forever. These 2, and then these are the things I used to clean out the pipe, EGR pipe. I used this one here. Helped a lot. My EGR pipe was probably blocked 80%, so spraying it down with brake clean and using these really helped a lot. Then the EGR cooler itself was probably 90% blocked, and you know, that took forever, maybe an hour and a half just to clear out. I mean, if I had kept driving, well, car wouldn't let me, but if I kept driving the way it was, that EGR cooler would have been turned into like a solid brick of carbon. I mean, you'd have to throw it away, you know. Luckily, I was able to, you know, clean it up the best I could. It's probably, you know, only 20 to 15% blocked now, but these helped a lot. I was gonna throw this away when I ordered it with this, but it ended up being super helpful. I used this one here to get inside the cooler and scrub out all the carbon particles, and then spraying it down to force it out. Believe it or not, all these other ones are way too thick. It wouldn't fit inside. So yeah, I use this one right here. Totally invaluable. You know, without it, none of that carbon was coming out, even with solvents and whatnot. So you know, my suggestion is you know, go to a junkyard, buy old one, clean it out. Then when you do your swap, you just put in the clean one, and then save the other one, your original one, and clean that one out. That way, every 100,000 miles, you're just swapping out these coolers, you know. If you're having the issue and you can't afford to get it fixed right away, my suggestion is to take out that pipe right there and then clean that out. And then that way, you know, I'm thinking it will at least be a stopgap measure until you can take the time to actually clean out the whole cooler system and everything. But there you go. I'm pretty happy. Everything turned out well, and I didn't have to dump a lot of money into fixing it. So good luck on your issues, and hopefully this will give you an idea of things you can do and the results you can expect.